very simple idea. All the page that you might get by visiting a bad website needs to do is go ask other IP addresses on your local area network what picture is there on a certain port. And based on whether it gets an answer back or not, it can see whether that computer is listening on that port. There are various ways that certain systems are associated with certain ports available and so on. So by visiting a bad website, you can download JavaScript, look around on your internal network, and by the idea on the previous slide, it can then export back to the server that sent you that information about your local area network. So this kind of risk is sort of unavoidable, although there are firewall kind of mechanisms and so on to prevent that. And there are other kinds of things that can be done with malicious JavaScript. I think I won't go through this in detail. There are some standard, highly publicized, well-known web attacks that are carried out by as a result of visiting bad websites that try to forge interaction with good websites. And this is a known problem, and it's, in this case, considered the responsibility of the good server to protect against cross-site request forgery from bad sites. So there's a whole class of problems having to do with the consequences of visiting a bad website and how we manage them and their consequences. So I think I'll leave that topic and go on to the next topic, which is good site with bad content. But if there are any questions about this topic, I'm happy to spend more time having fun here if you have any questions. We'll skip. So the next category of threats, and the one I want to focus on more today, has to do with visiting a good site that has some bad stuff on it. So you might wonder how that could happen, and I'll give you some examples. But let's first just see what this bad content on a good site might do. So bad content on a good site could ask you for information that you wouldn't enter into a random bad site you found by web surfing, but you would enter into this kind of good site you trust. So think of Facebook or MySpace as a kind of example. There's a fairly well-known Sammy worm that was on somebody's MySpace page and would ask for a password. And people would enter their MySpace password because it was MySpace. And in fact, some browsers had an auto password entry feature that was fooled by the fact this was on MySpace, and it would enter passwords automatically. So that was a very effective way of capturing people's MySpace username and passwords. Then there's other data associated with something like your interaction with your bank. When you go and log in, that data may be stored client-side or server-side during your interaction with the bank. There's information that's available to you as part of your session with a good site that bad code could take and export and send off to, I guess, the Ukraine is one of my favorite. I always think of the Italian Job. I don't know, the movie was a couple of years ago. There's some big, heavy Ukrainian guy with a lot of chains and baseball bats and stuff like that. So I know that's sort of where organized crime lives. You think of that. I mean, there's organized crime in other parts of the world, but
Like Providence.
Yeah. I guess that's true. We could, but your username and password is already here, so shipping it to Providence is a bad example. So why would a good site host? Here's another example. You can actually generate a transaction. So this is something we hypothesized a few years ago and then have seen in the wild. There could be an advertisement that tries to generate an Amazon transaction if you happen to be logged into Amazon, because everybody knows what the format of posting a transaction to Amazon is, and so on. So there are risks of that sort. So why would a good site host bad content? So here's one kind of example. If you're an iGoogle user or user of a site like this is a site that lets you set up your own page, and you can put gadgets, pieces of applications built by others on your page if you think they're cool. And there's nothing to keep one of those gadgets from being written by some malicious person. And so this kind of setup is amenable to people putting up malicious gadgets into a library or set of applications that unsuspecting good people can install on their pages. And when somebody views this, it's a good page. None of us really hate Google yet that badly. It's still a popular company most places in the world. But, you know, it could be bad content on your good page. And this evil gadget could, you know, take information from some other place. If you had a stock ticker and your stock trading gadget and some other things here, there's, you know, unless we're careful, the bad content on a good site could steal information from other places there. Another example, really good example, I think, is advertising. Advertising is really here to stay, I think. It's big business. Lots of publishers, the site that's here, How Stuff Works, are sponsored by advertising, and advertising comes from someplace else. So the person who wrote this page about how a web advertising works has no input into how this advertisement works, and this advertisement could try to do something malicious. So I think it's maybe good to, I'll show a picture later, but the ad network is the organization that takes money from advertisers and pays money to publishers, people who put together blogs or news sites or so on that show the ads. And to get a little more technical about it, the hosting publishers page could isolate the advertisement in what's called an iframe, a kind of controlled portion of a page. But they don't often do that. And the reason is that there are more profitable ads, the ones we all hate. Everybody likes those ads that kind of floats over the whole page and you won't go away until you chase down the right place and click it. Those things bring more money in to the advertising network and the page hosting than little constrained ads. And so there's an incentive to display them. And those are the more dangerous ones that are not constrained by the iframe mechanism in the browser. So ad networks can try to screen ads, and I'll talk about that more later. There's some advertising networks that let an ad contain a link someplace else, and that provides you know, another avenue for attack. But let's focus on this issue as the talk progresses. I think the bottom line here is this is a very, very effective way for a malicious person to reach victims. For a few cents per impression, you can place an advertisement that then gets served to millions of people all over the world. And if you have a way to craft a malicious advertisement that when it executes steals information from people, you know, you're paying a couple cents per person to get that information from people all over. We measured this number by an experiment that was not really malicious. But posted advertisements lots of places. And it's a good way of finding out information, like what versions of browsers are people running, or what headers do they supply, and so on. There's the web, another point here, the web is a really great topic for research because it's easy to get connected. People send you their web applications, you can analyze them. You can find out what's going on there by posting advertisements. It's a great platform for research. Another point that I want to just make here, often when I've talked about web security, people walk out saying, oh, I get it, just don't click on bad advertisements. That almost has nothing to do with it. Anything that could happen by, almost anything that could happen by clicking could be automated by JavaScript that clicks for you. So you can't protect yourself by not clicking. You're going to get advertisements from any place in the world. They're going to show up on your browser. We ought to build systems that protect against that, and that's what keeps security people employed. Another point about good content and bad content, here's an example. This is a restaurant search site. You can click on a restaurant and it will show up here. You can click on a location on the map and it will scroll here to that restaurant. The restaurant site, as the web is currently constructed, has to trust the JavaScript that implements the map. But what if that were malicious? What if there were a bug? Shouldn't we have some way to isolate the bad content on a good site But in isolating it, we can't